Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 354th Fighter Wing Live Virtual Coronavirus Town Hall. Today is March 23, and this is our third update to the wing. I'm Tech Sergeant Kinsneza from the Eielson Public Affairs Office, and today I'm joined by Colonel Benjamin Bishop, the 354th Fighter Wing Commander, here to talk about the coronavirus and the changes occurring on our installation in the last week that are impacting the Eielson community. We also have Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Matthew Ramage, the 354th Medical Group's Chief of Aerospace Medicine. Hello, Doc. And Captain Tristan Forsythe, the Mental Health Officer in charge. So for our listeners, there will be a Q&A portion of this town hall, several in fact. So please let us know what is on your minds and we'll try to get to it in the next hour here. Now to start off, sir, there have been a few changes announced since we were last here. Can you talk to some of the key points airmen should know? Absolutely.
Before I do that, though, just thanks for everyone dialing in and listening and giving us their questions. Communication is key, and I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to connect with you. So speaking of those changes, as we know, the COVID situation is always rapidly changing, and this weekend is no exception to that. So currently, I want to give you an update where we are now at Eielson Air Force Base. Regarding cases, we have no known cases of COVID-19 on the base. In terms of cases across the state, some of you may have seen that number went up to 32 recently. Here in Fairbanks, we have 7 known cases in the local area. We continue to monitor the situation very closely. We'll talk about some details on how we're doing that. But just another highlight, in terms of testing on base, we've done 11 total tests. We have 4 results that are pending. We just took those this morning, and we've had 7 that have come back as negative. So that's kind of where we sit in terms of the cases. Eielson Air Force Base is Health Protection Condition Bravo, or HPCon Bravo, and you may have seen across the state those have changed down at JBER, and we can talk to the details on that in just a little bit. Over the weekend, we also issued a handful of command directives. This is the formal process that we use in order to communicate to the wing and also to the community as actions we are taking. Specifically, we wanted to formally communicate changes that we're making, especially as the governor issued some state health mandates. In the 354th Fighter Wing in Eielson, we complied with those health mandates as much as we can, mission and operational constraint being consistent with being able to get after the mission and our operational requirements. So you will have seen that some of the additional services are closed. Some highlights on there is our chapel is virtual only in terms of services. You can still go there for private prayer reflection as long as you wipe in and wipe out and maintain social distance. Also, our gatherings on base have been reduced to a maximum of 10. And again, mission permitting. So those are some of the big changes. The other one you'll see is the beauty shop and the barber shop are both closed on base. So I'm sure that lends to a lot of questions regarding what are the standards in terms of our hair and grooming standards. And I will say we were going to issue formal guidance on those through the command directives. So those are some of the things that are ongoing. And again, I'm sure you have lots of questions, so please send those questions in and we'll be able to answer them as we go through this town hall.
And just a note to our listeners, the command directives 7.1, 10, and 11, the newest ones issued in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, are available on the Eielson coronavirus page. That's www.eielson.af.mil/coronavirus. So if you want to know more about that, if you want to see the words for yourself, just visit the page and you'll have it at your fingertips. Moving on, so sir, can you speak to some of the guidance about how these directives are going to be affecting grooming standards, or is that something that we should wait for formal guidance to come
Yes,
down?
so your leadership team is discussing that, and we will issue formal guidance on how that will flow out. So we're actually drafting that command directive right now. From this meeting, I'm going to go to a 1300 virtual meeting with all the squadron commanders and leadership on base, and we'll be discussing those topics. But also, I want to kind of share with you how we're going through the decision-making process. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there how this is working. So I just want to give you a little kind of peek behind the curtain of what's going on with the wing leadership. The way it works is this. Every day at 0800, I have a meeting. It's called a senior CAT meeting. And it's a virtual meeting, the senior CAT, what that is the Senior Crisis Action Team. That's a formal term we use to indicate the senior wing leadership. So it's myself, Colonel Anger, Chief Hansen, who I think they're all chiming in here in the virtual town hall. So they'll be helping us answer some questions. But also the group commanders, our public affairs, our legal team, we all get together in order to sync and get on the same mental model. We've been discussing these every day for well over a week, to include the weekends. And then during the duty days, we've been getting together at 1700 as well. And we discuss the situation, we discuss the current framework, and we make decisions, and then we institute those formally. And again, I already alluded to those. We issue formal guidance through the 354th Fighter Wing Command Directives. Those go down to squadron commanders, which go down to supervisors, which go down to airmen, and then also to the community. Typically, what you'll see in that battle rhythm is we'll release it through command channels. We'll wait a little bit to make sure there's no questions from commanders, and then we'll release it to the broader community. All the command directives that I will post on our Facebook page and then also on our website, in order to be able to get that information out. You might wonder why there aren't all posted on there, and there are some for official use only direction. That's mostly internal wing guidance, like information we're collecting and how we're processing. But anything that impacts the community as a whole, we will get that information out there. One of the things that we are looking is I have 3 very clear priorities as we manage and navigate this situation. Is 1, we're going to care for our airmen and our families. Number 2, we're going to safeguard our mission. And then number 3, we're going to support our local community through this crisis. And I will say that's the framework we use with every decision. And I will say we're using different frameworks and time horizons, because I'm looking to support those priorities through the short term, but also we all know that the coronavirus may go on for a significant amount of time. So we're also posturing for the long term. I have the utmost confidence that we're going to get through this as a team. I have full hope that as we continue to work together as a team and communicate, we're going to get through this and we're going to be just fine. But the way we do that is by making sure we're making measured decisions according to our priorities. So a good example is the gym is still open. I have gotten advice from my public health team that we can keep the gym open with the measures that we have placed and reduce the risk of coronavirus infection, as long as we all do what we're supposed to be doing, and I see that happening. However, there is a risk once we close the gym, and there is a resiliency risk, and we'll talk to that a little bit later in this section of how we can mitigate that risk. So we are balancing that as well. Also, there's a mission that we have to do. Our mission at Eielson Air Force Base directly supports the defense and the readiness of this nation. And we as Air Force members are committed to accomplishing the mission even in a contested environment, for example, coronavirus. So a good example is you look over at Aviano. That fighter wing is continuing to fly sorties, and they're doing it in a safe manner, and they're mitigating the coronavirus risk. Same thing with our airmen in Korea. They are getting after the mission, and they're continuing. And we're going to do that here at Eielson Air Force Base and in the interior of Alaska.
All right, sir, that's a lot of information to unpack. Just key takeaways from that is that leadership is considering all of the options available to them as the situation evolves and as new cases are announced throughout Fairbanks or throughout Alaska, and as DoD guidance and directives come down. It is our wing commanders, squadron commanders, group commanders, they're all kind of sitting in a room, or not sitting in a room, virtually. They are sitting and talking about what can we do, how can we continue to get after the mission, but also taking care of our families and our airmen, because people are the #1 asset into the military. And we've heard Colonel Bishop say it, we've heard all of our top leaders say it over and over again, and this is a prime example of all of those being factored into how decisions are made. Now we're going to go into some questions right now. Sir, I have one question here, and it says, is there a potential for the dining facility to close? And if so, what will dorm airmen what's going to happen with that?
I will say, as I look at my priorities in caring for airmen and their families, obviously that includes feeding them. So we have procedures in place in order to make sure we ensure our airmen are properly fed and maintained through whatever contingency we might face.
Of note, the dining facility, I was actually over there just checking to see, because I have an airman who eats at the dining facility, and they have takeaway. It's takeaway options only. The salad bar is closed, and now they have them in prepackaged containers. So there are things that the dining facility precautions the dining facility is taking to make sure that they're mitigating risk, but also making sure that our airmen are fed and healthy. Next question is from in-house here, is will there be a curfew implemented at any point? Can you foresee that coming up?
Well, I won't speak to a specific curfew, but I will say I will take whatever measures necessary, depending on the situation, to ensure we safeguard our airmen and families, to ensure that we are able to safeguard our mission, and then also support the community. So curfews are things that are on the plate as far as that menu of options. It's something I'll again talk to my senior commanders regarding in terms of that possibility. I will say at this point, I'm not considering a curfew, but again, depending on how the situation evolves, that's something that we may put in place if it gets after our priorities.
All right, I think we can all get on board with that. It would be, as someone who lives down in Fairbanks, not in Fairbanks, but in North Pole, and because we have airmen who live in Fairbanks, I can only imagine what the assessment and the conversation is like with commanders trying to figure out where is the balance. So now we're going to go into our first break with a note from the U.S. Surgeon General.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Surgeon General, a question. We were talking about this before the briefing. A lot of folks, they're watching TV, they're reading up on this constantly. If you are not, somebody who's got a pre-existing health condition, but you all of a sudden you go, all of a sudden I just don't feel 100%. And then your mind just starts playing with you, right? You think, oh my God, I coughed 3 hours ago. Was that a first sign? When should those people really start to say, okay, maybe I need to call the doctor? Because you don't want to flood them. But a lot of people that are probably healthy right now are thinking, whoa, wait, that's all I'm hearing about. That's all I can think about. When should I either call a doctor or get tested?
You need a test?
Well, I hope not.
I asked him before you came in if they did temperature checks.
Right?
You better not.
The Vice President gave an important statistic this morning. Only 10% of the people who have symptoms who've been tested actually tested positive for coronavirus, meaning 9 out of 10 people who actually likely had symptoms do not have the coronavirus. So I want people to understand that so that they are reassured. I also want to direct people to a website we've been telling them about all the time, coronavirus.gov. Coronavirus.gov has information to walk you through the symptoms, fever, cough, shortness of breath, body aches, and what to do if you have symptoms or you're worried. The most important thing we can tell people is call your healthcare provider, talk to your healthcare provider. Information is at coronavirus.gov to walk you through when to come in and when and what to do.
Hey teammates, we know you have lots of questions about the impacts of COVID-19 to your situation, whether it's PCS, TDY, school, or leave. Our team is working hard to keep the details updated as quickly as possible. We want you to keep in mind that official resources will have the most current and accurate information. Sites like afpc.af.mil and af.mil both have dedicated pages for COVID-19. Now, if your travel is projected to be impacted by the DoD stop movement, you should receive official guidance through email. Maximum use of telework is encouraged for all eligible personnel. Talk to your supervisor to determine status and reporting requirements. Our priority in this time is to take care of you while also doing our part to minimize the spread of this disease. Let's all do our part to take care of ourselves and each other. Remember this, just because a teammate is quarantined, they don't have to feel isolated. Reach out, check on your wingman. Thanks for your understanding as we navigate this tough time together.
And we are back, and you just heard a message from this U.S. Surgeon General. I am Tech Sergeant Quintanilla from the Eielson Public Affairs Office, and I'm joined by Colonel Benjamin Bishop, the 354th Fighter Wing Commander, and a few of our health experts from the Med Group. Gentlemen, welcome. Now, before the break, we were talking about mitigating risk, and Colonel Bishop was kind of walking us through the decision-making matrix, really. Like, how do the commanders take into account the mission, but also the safety of the airmen, especially in a time where we're talking about a viral infection and illness, and those two things really kind of meet head on. And Colonel Bishop gave us some insight into the fact that our leaders are talking to each other and looking at, okay, if we do this, this is what the second and third order effects are. Now, there's some questions about moving into mission essential personnel only reporting to the base, and especially knowing that our partners down at JBER has moved into HPCon Charlie. Sir, can you speak to some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I do is I stay in close contact with the other installation commanders across the state of Alaska. We have a running text stream that's ongoing. In fact, I was talking to Colonel Cheif, she's the commander of the 673rd Air Base Wing down in JBER yesterday afternoon, when she actually got the news that they had 7 positive cases that popped up in their clinic from their test results. So that was a change, and that drove some of their decision making. Some of you may have seen that JBER did go to HPCon Charlie, and they have gone to Mission Essential only. In terms of, is Eielson going to go to Mission Essential? And I will say this question came up last week during our last town hall, and it's a good question. And I will say again, that's something I would definitely consider if that is something that we need to do in order to properly safeguard our airmen and our families, and also safeguard the mission. Then we'll certainly go Mission Essential when I deem it's proper to do that. I will say when that decision happens, you're going to see it roll down through command channels. So we'll issue a formal command directive. We'll make sure all our squadron commanders are aware. They'll be communicating to their airmen, and then we'll also be communicating to the community. So I will say there's lots of questions here, and the town hall here is a great way to get that information out. But I would again strongly encourage you, if you have questions, please contact your frontline supervisor. If you have medical questions, and we have resources that we have posted on our webpage, and then you can also contact the medical clinic. So again, this is going to be a rapidly changing scenario, but that's what we do as airmen. We operate in that environment. We're comfortable in that environment because we can communicate clearly when we got fundamental command and control. The one thing I do ask all of you is that you have an active part in this. And we'll talk to these a little bit later in the cast, but you need to take proactive means in order to protect yourself, in the airmen and our families, in our mission, and our community as a whole, by making sure you're practicing good hygiene, making sure you're wiping in, wiping out of your workspace, making sure you're practicing good social distancing, and maintaining all those precautions. We do all that, and everything's, again, going to be just fine.
All right, so to clarify, the JBER went into HPCon Charlie. Do you know if it was strictly driven on the positive test that came through, and is that a big factor in why we are not in mission essential status?
Yes, so as we communicate, we look at different installations. So the environment down in JBER is significantly different than up here in Eielson. So Colonel Cheif has over 35,000 people on their base on a daily basis. So the through fare there and their mission impact is significantly different than ours. So I see this scenario is different, but again, we're continuing to monitor the situation. We're going to take very proactive measures in order to properly secure our base. A good example is last week. I thought it was it was proper in order to place anyone that had traveled outside the state of Alaska into a restriction of movement. There was nothing mandating me to do that, but that was a decision I took unilaterally in order to best care for our airmen and families, safeguard our mission, and support the community. So we had over 750 people in quarantine, to include our dependents, contractors, and civilians. So it's an example of one of the things that we did here that was different. But again, it's different. Our environment is different than it is JBER. The good news is you can have confidence knowing that commanders are communicating with each other, communicating up the chain and down the chain, and we'll get that information out just as best as we can.
All right, and if you are one of this over 750 people, please like our page. We hope you're listening, and we hope that you're getting some good information here. If you have some questions, please feel free to send a comment into the team so that we can address them. Now, sir, on the same topic, here's a question: is there a way to fix the VPN issue of not allowing users to access it from home?
Yes, so there is an issue, and we are actively working it. And when I say we, that is the Air Force. So this has a higher level attention, and I rest assured the Air Force is putting its full weight in in order to get after this mission. Here locally, we're doing the same. Our communication squadron airmen, they're a fantastic team that are getting after this as well. And we're looking at ways we can communicate through VPN, and there's other ways we can communicate as well using other applications. So that is one of the things that I'm most concerned about, is making sure we maintain the good flow of communication, and obviously VPN is one of those avenues.
All right. We're going to take a break with a note from General Ramage, Chief of Space Operations. Please stay tuned.
We are facing challenging times with the recent outbreak of coronavirus. The World Health Organization identified COVID-19 as a global pandemic, and the President has declared it a national emergency due to the speed and scale of transmission. Because of this, the Secretary of Defense has directed travel restrictions for the next 60 days for uniformed members, our civilian teammates, and our family members.
This includes all forms of official travel for non-essential personnel, to include PCS, TDY, and government-funded leave. This also includes personal leave and other non-official travel. We know this impacts you and your families, but your safety and wellness are our top priority. We can't stress enough how important you are to our team. COVID-19 is serious. It's highly communicable and has already affected many countries. A disciplined sense of urgency is essential.
Each one of us has a personal responsibility to do all we can to help minimize the spread of this virus. We must all take personal hygiene and health protection measures as outlined by the CDC seriously in order to safeguard ourselves and our loved ones.
Our approach is simple. We need to take care of each other while we protect our fellow Americans. If you show symptoms consistent with COVID-19, immediately seek medical care and evaluation.
You can find more information and resources at cdc.gov, af.mil, and spaceforce.mil. We'll continue to post the latest information and keep everyone informed. You'll know what we know. Let's tackle this challenge as we do all challenges which confront us.
Thank you for your continued service and your professionalism. Fights on.
We believe this new virus spreads mostly from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when someone who is sick coughs or sneezes. This is similar to how flu and other respiratory illnesses spread. These droplets can land in the mouth or nose of people nearby, or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. Most person-to-person spread happens when people are in close contact. It's also possible that this virus can spread when someone touches a contaminated surface and then touches the mouth, nose, or eyes.
And we are back. I am Tech Sergeant Ken Sneezer from the Eielson Public Affairs with our third live virtual town hall to discuss the coronavirus. I'm joined by Colonel Benjamin Bishop, the 354th Fighter Wing Commander, and some of our health experts, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Matthew Ramage, and again, Captain Tristan Forsythe. So before the break, we were talking about some of the mitigating risk aspects. And we're going to move right on into actions that you can take. So in a time like this where people kind of feel at the mercy of what's happening around them, I think a lot of people are looking to the medical health professionals around them and in the room, and certainly on the base for some guidance. So Colonel Ramage, Captain Forsythe, can you speak to what the medical group is doing and continue to do throughout this pandemic?
Absolutely. Thank you for having us in here today. So arguably, this is the first pandemic that has occurred during the information age. What a time we're in. This allows us, the scientific community across the world, to real-time share information. And so we're utilizing the experience of folks around the world. Just a couple updates since we last talked. Vaccine trials are ongoing in the world. Of course, I wouldn't expect to necessarily have a vaccine if those initial trials work within about a year. And as you might have heard with the news that President Trump was discussing, there is an investigation on trials for some medications that can be used for the treatment of COVID. Again, those trials are ongoing and we're pending those pending those results. Our biggest goal here, people are going to get the virus. They're going to be infected. And so the goal is to flatten the curve, to spread out the amount of folks getting ill and critically ill during one time so that we can preserve those limited medical resources and ultimately, as with here on base, to preserve the mission. You might, if you've been to the medical group within the past week, you might have seen some formative changes. As an effort to protect those vulnerable population, to protect those that are otherwise not ill, we've divided the clinic, and you'll talk to our door guides at the very front of the clinic to direct folks with respiratory symptoms to the side COVID/upper respiratory infection clinic, and those others that do not have symptoms are being seen in the main clinic body. And so again, that is to make sure that we're minimizing exposure as much as practical to those individuals who are vulnerable and who are otherwise not sick. I've had a lot of discussions with commanders out there of how can they maintain operations in the event that somebody within their section becomes sick. So as long as folks are maintaining this social distancing that we've been talking about, that will minimize the quarantine needed if somebody should become sick. So don't become a contact. What is a contact? If you have direct physical contact with secretions of somebody, if somebody coughs in your face, coughs in your mouth, you lick a doorknob that somebody has coughed on, don't do that either. That puts you at risk. But additionally, if you're having prolonged defined as 15 minutes or more of contact with somebody within that 6-foot space bubble, you are at risk if they were having symptoms. So maintain that social distancing, and then you will not be at risk to be quarantined later if somebody should, hopefully, but if somebody should pop positive with COVID. Now, there is some discussion out there. Yes, we are seeing a limited amount of shedding of the virus, transmitting that virus if folks are not having symptoms. However, it looks like once individuals are starting to have symptoms is when the viral load that the folks are shedding becomes significantly higher. So as soon as you're having symptoms, cough, fever, shortness of breath, make sure you separate yourself from others so that you're not spreading that. If you're sick, please, please, please do not go to work. Discussions that we've had with commanders, of course, they're trying to maintain the amount of individuals at work. If you're sick, the recommendation is not to return to work until the following conditions have been met. You're 7 days since the first symptoms that you're having, and you're 72 hours symptom-free. So that means no fever, no cough, and you haven't taken any medication. So 7 days since your first symptoms and 72 hours symptom-free. That is a very wide window, but the data that we're seeing, if you were even diagnosed with COVID, that is a recommendation that you would not be shedding a virus to any appreciable degree to maintain the health of your work section.
Thank you for that, sir. A lot of good information, and I want to ask a question about why, maybe we addressed this in our last town hall, why 6 feet of social distancing? What drives that directive?
That is a great question. And so with the available information that we're seeing right now, COVID, like the other coronaviruses in its family, is not airborne. It requires a vehicle, those spit particles that come out when you cough or sneeze. Luckily, those are very heavy and don't tend to linger in the air for an appreciable period of time, and they typically will fall, as long as you're in a typically ventilated area, to the ground within about a 6-foot bubble. So if you stay out of somebody's comfort zone, you should be okay.
Okay, so one of the issues that are coming up, or that we've discussed certainly as a team in the Public Affairs Office, is how do we stay, what are the risks for resiliency, in terms of resiliency? If we are supposed to be staying away from people and we're supposed to be quarantined, some people are even in isolation, how are we supposed to stay upbeat and happy, or just not letting this stuff get to us? Any tips from Captain Forsythe, our mental health officer in charge?
Yes, thank you for, that's a great question. So there's a difference intrinsically between social distancing and social connection. This is a trying time for everyone, but the good news is we are literally in this together. Every single one of us is having a joined experience, which is something to which all of us can relate. What I would encourage you to do is to lean into that. I'm not saying to kind of spread as much panic as you possibly can over the airwaves, but rather find ways, maybe unusual ways, to connect with one another. Obviously, there's been hilarious memes that have gone out, and that has been a wonderful byproduct of all of this stuff. That is an example of social connection that helps sustain us in terms of resiliency. I would really recommend working on social connection, writing letters, reaching out to people that you may not have talked to in a while. Think about what informed you joining this conversation today with your wonderful questions and giving us your patience while you're listening to us. That thoughtfulness that you took to tune into this is what is going to sustain you. Think about your appetite and your relationship with media. What is it that you're reading and practicing every day? If you're practicing plugging into things that scare you or that are highly reactive, then that might be the byproduct that you're feeling at home. But if you're practicing things like being present with your family or with your friends, then those are things that you can benefit from. I am mill to mill. So my wife and I are literally in this both occupationally and relationally. And she's presently on quarantine, which makes our household strange. But we were able to have a picnic this weekend. She can't go outside, so we had a picnic in our living room, and we stayed 6 feet apart. Thank you, Dr. Ramage. But it was something different, and it changed it up. We turned off the television. We lit candles. It was awesome. I had a great time. So finding creative and interesting ways to enhance your life, and practice those every day if you can.
So I will say Captain Forsythe is spot on. As we have social distancing, and that's important, something we need to get after. And there's memes out there. Some of them I like them. One of my favorites is, "This is the first time in history we can save the human race by lying in front of the TV and doing nothing." Let's not screw this up, right? So have some humor. I like that one because it's true. Like we all need to take part in that in order to get through it. But it's also, you've got a sense of humor. I will say, just personally, my wife and I, who's listening at home right now, we're doing everything we can in order to capitalize on this. So restaurants are closed. So my oldest, who's 9, went to the Force Support Squadron cooking class a couple weeks ago. So the Bishop Bistro was open last night. Wow. And our 9-year-old made dinner, and our 8-year-old was the waiter. And so they had to do their own menu. They had to produce the menu. They did that over the weekend, and then yesterday they gave us a meal. They had to serve it, and then they actually got to put some prices on it, so they got to do the math and figure out the bill to include the tip. So those are some things that brought us together as a family without cell phones and such. So again, look for those opportunities to connect. So social connection is important. We can do that and still remain physically apart.
Sir, is the Bishop Bistro going to be open for takeout only soon?
Yeah, make sure that doesn't get out in the waves. So it's only in the Bishop household.
We only have thousands of people listening.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
Okay.
Exactly. There might be a lineup.
So Captain Forsythe, you mentioned social distancing versus social connection, and in my office we were talking about the difference between social distancing and physical distancing. I know that we were discussing this over the break. If anyone wants to chime in on the difference. Colonel Bishop, you had something some sage
Yes,
advice?
so again, social distancing, really what it is physical distancing. And just like Captain Forsythe mentioned, in times like this, we have a shared experience across the wing, across the base, across the interior of Alaska, really across the nation and really the world. So this is an opportunity for us to come together. I will say, I look at coronavirus as a threat, and is a threat to our airmen families, it's a threat to our mission, it's a threat to our community. And we as airmen and as a larger community can come together to battle this threat. And the great thing about this threat is we understand it, we know how it operates, and we know what we can do in order to combat it. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the 354th Fighter Wing and the Eielson community moving forward.
Yes, community is a big factor in this, and you don't have to be present physically with your community. I think it's also a feeling of community and a sense of community. And Eielson certainly has the edge over some of the larger bases. Certainly in my experience, it's hard to feel like you're part of a family when you cross by people so many times, and you don't even know who they are. So I think that's one of the strengths that Eielson has going for it. And Captain Forsythe, I'd like to speak to your tip. I certainly took your advice without even knowing it. It's just reaching out to old friends from high school, making sure that they're okay, sending a meme that just has a funny picture. So the first thing that they see when they wake up is a message from an old friend who they haven't heard from in a while that hopefully made them laugh. And I know for sure a friend, she's like, what a thing to wake up to. Oh my goodness, it had me laughing before I even fully woke up. So that kind of interaction and engagement really made me feel good because I'm helping someone else feel good, and someone certainly who means a lot to me and who maybe without this I probably would have gone another couple of weeks or months without speaking to her. Another thing is, I mean, as we're all, I say this with air quotes, trapped inside, it's not really, I encourage people to look at it from a different lens. I mean, the Bishop Bistro is open to their home only, of course, but they're finally finding activities to do indoors that keeps them safe, but also brings a sense of togetherness and family in a time when really that's who you have with you. You know, you can't go out to restaurants and you can't go out do all these things, but you do have the people that hopefully matter the most to you in your life right there, who you can continue to talk and maybe rediscover. I don't know if you guys if there are listeners out there who are having a very meaningful conversation with someone that they see all the time, but maybe this conversation wouldn't have happened if you weren't stuck inside. You know, so if you guys have some things that you're doing in your household to keep the spirits up and keep everyone engaged and active and not just glued to the television screen, please share it. We're interested to know. Please give some advice, and maybe some of the fellow listeners and people who are tuning in can take a cue from you and hopefully benefit from that experience. We have a question now. Sorry if that went on a little bit long. We have a question from Jenny Kaczynski, and I think this is aimed at you, Captain Forsythe, certainly the medical team. Any tips for us at the CDC?
In terms of maintaining your sanity?
Well, maybe that's there. Sure.
Certainly grounding yourself as much as you can. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of unknowns, but there are also a lot of knowns, which is that even us having this conversation, there are people that care, and there are infrastructures in place that protect us and anticipate. It's literally Colonel Bishop's job to forecast the worst possible things that could happen. Him and the commanders, that's what their meetings are about. And so there are things in place that are specifically designed, and people who are experts that are in place to protect us and to have discussions about things that are scary, so that if anything remotely close to that happens, we are ready for them. Navigating the CDC as a mill-to-mill with a new baby, that is a trick that I am still learning. I would say patience with our care providers. They are amazing, and they are in this with us, and they are doing the best they possibly can. I always default to good communication. I'm a huge Mr. Rogers fan, and one of his things that he said that I've carried with me throughout my life and that has served me my entire life is, if it's mentionable, it is manageable. So if you are having trouble with the CDC, if you're having, if there's things you're running into with your child or with your child caretakers, communicate about it. That is the best thing that you can do. That way it's not something that you're carrying or that your child is carrying or that your family is carrying. And who knows, if you communicate about it, perhaps there's another family that's struggling with it and the CDC can address it directly. I'm very appreciative of questions for our little ones. That's a great one. Thank you.
All right, and I don't have children, but I know that all of the members whose children are at the CDC, I hope that you guys are sending good wishes and good thoughts to the CDC providers. I know they're doing an outstanding job. Colonel Bishop?
Yes, and just one thing there's lots of questions regarding the CDC. Currently the CDC remains open because it's part of producing our mission and caring for our airmen and families. I will say, however, if you are a parent who has children that go to the CDC and you're not comfortable sending them to CDC, feel free to keep them home. You're not going to lose your place. We have Air Force guidance that helps and safeguard that. So if you have any concerns, or if you have a child that's sick, or maybe you've been traveling outside the state within the last 14 days, or if had contact with somebody that may have contracted the coronavirus, feel free to keep them home. You're not going to lose your place, and there's not going to be any issue with that. And again, like Captain Forsythe mentioned, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So please continue to give us feedback and bring this up.
Yes, a big takeaway from what Captain Forsythe said, and certainly Colonel Bishop has been emphasizing this, is communication. Talk to your chain of command, talk to your supervisors. If something is not clear, bring it up, and it's certainly something that is worth the time and attention that it takes to clearly get that information out to airmen and to their families. So if, again, note out to all of our listeners, if something is not clear, just share it. Ask on Facebook or something like that, and someone will hear it. Now we're moving on to another question. Again, for the medical team, are walk-in services going on, specifically pediatric weight checks? And that comes from Alexandria Sorensen.
Yes, so obviously the world is having one giant hiccup, but life still goes on. And so thank God, babies are still being born, people are still doing things, people are tripping on shoes in the living room. Other non-COVID medical issues are happening. So if you're having these, that's why we're specifically going to a symptomatic respiratory clinic, as well as maintaining the non-symptomatic clinic inside the medical group. If you have children who are getting well baby examinations, the weight checks after they're born, bring them in, and we will get you taken care of. We're also developing the flow that for our higher risk folks who we don't necessarily want to bring into the upper respiratory and COVID clinic, we have a separate area of clinic that is further segregated from the other non-sick individuals for this very reason. We will get you taken care of.
All right, you hear that straight from the doc. The clinic is not closed for operations. Things are changing because of the pandemic, of course, but you can be seen, and he's about to jump in and tell me that I said something wrong.
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
But there's one thing that I do want folks to completely take to heart. If it is not absolutely necessary for you to travel, stay at home. This storm needs to pass, and we need to stay out of its way. Don't unnecessarily expose yourself to a potential infection. Every time that you leave the house, I hate to be fatalistic about this, but every time that you leave the house, that is an opportunity to bring this into your family. So stay at home, but if you need to be seen or having some anxiety, we'll take care of you.
Yes. And they're motioning to each other, and it's distracting me because it's funny. But the big message to take away from there is that we're all exposed to the same things, but practicing the good health measures, washing your hands, not licking doorknobs like the doc likes to say, just All of those things are going to help you through this time. Social distancing, again, we learned, is not the same as or is different from physical distancing, which is what we're actually doing, and still maintaining that social connection. And on that note, we're going to take our third break with a word from the U.S. Surgeon General. Please stay tuned.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
The virus that causes coronavirus disease is spreading in some of our communities. This disease, also known as COVID-19, is thought to spread mainly from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes. These droplets can spread to the mouth, nose, or hands of people who are nearby, or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. Take steps to lower your risk of getting sick. Here are some things you should do. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. You can also use hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Take extra measures to put distance between yourself and others. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Stay home if you're sick, except to get medical care. If you have severe symptoms, please call 911. Cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or the inside of your elbow. Only wear a face mask if you're sick and around other people, or if you need to take care of someone who is sick. Clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces. Older adults and people who have severe chronic medical conditions like heart or lung disease or diabetes are at higher risk for more serious illness from COVID-19. This group should consult with their healthcare provider about additional steps to stay protected. For more information on COVID-19, please visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Let's work together to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Attention all 354th Fighter Wing active duty airmen. The base commander has restricted all non-essential movement to include leave, temporary duty locations, and permanent changes of station. Eielson Air Force Base is currently in Health Protection Condition Bravo. Upon arrival to Hersey Gate, present your identification to the 354th Security Forces personnel with the barcode clearly exposed and ready for scanning. Do not depart until instructed to do so. For more information, consult your chain of command and stay up to date by visiting eielson.af.mil/coronavirus/.
And we're back. Thank you guys for joining us. I am Tech Sergeant Quintaniza from the Eielson Public Affairs Office, and we are joined by Colonel Benjamin Bishop, the 354th Fighter Wing Commander, and our medical team, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Matthew Ramage and Captain Tristan Forsythe. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and thank you guys for tuning in. We have a few more questions that came through Facebook from our listeners, and sir, this is from Edison. I don't know. I'm sorry, Edison, for getting your last name wrong. And the question is: there are NAF and APF employees which their duties do not allow them to telework but can't work due to social distancing guidelines. Is there a path forward to make sure these employees can continue to receive a paycheck?
Yeah, that's a great question, Edison, and that's something your wing leadership is actively working. And it's not just a Eielson problem, and it's an Air Force issue. So big Air Force is working on that. We are encouraging telework to the max extent possible, but obviously there's some jobs where you can't telework. We also have this issue for a lot of our airmen that do physical work and get after the mission. So that is something that we're going to be addressing this afternoon at our 1300. If you have questions, I encourage you to please contact your supervisors, contact your squadron leadership. Again, as we get formal guidance, we're going to communicate it down through those channels in order to address that concern. And I just ask you, if you're not getting the answers that you want, please continue to engage with your leadership team. Continue to make sure we mention this problem so we can properly manage it to take care of our airmen and their families. And I use the airmen capital A, that includes all our civilian employees and even our, our contractors that we rely on it in order to get after that mission in our community as a whole. So it's a great question. We're working it.
All right, more to follow on that. Our next question is from Amanda Bjorn, and her question is more sanitary supplies for shops, ?
So I guess the shops there, I can look at that in two frames. One is workshops, like shops across the wing, and I will say we put a mass order for sanitary supplies over a week ago, and those are coming in through our outstanding LRS squadron, and we're distributing that out to the units. I will say if you are in a shop and you are active duty civilian or contractor, you don't have the sanitation supplies you need in order to wipe in and wipe out, please contact your supervisor, contact your chain of command, get that word, get that mentioned so we can manage it and take care of it. I need that communication to happen from across the wing. So it is my intent to give everyone who's operating in the 354th Fighter Wing and also our tenant units the ability to have a safe workspace, and you need those supplies. Another way of looking at that is the shop, the commissary, for example. I know my family may be interested in when toilet paper is going to be back in the commissary. So some of you may have those questions, and I will say that is one of the things that I have constant connection with is our AFES regional manager and also our storage director here at Eielson. I just talked to our storage director this morning, for example, and they have put mass orders in for supplies. She gave me some details. For example, we should be getting milk in today or tomorrow, milk and eggs. We got a meat order in, and she's expecting paper products to be flowing in with those. So she ordered lots of different types of toilet paper in order to kind of spread that portfolio wide in case Charmin is out. You can get another type. So one of the things that we are doing in our commissary, hopefully you're aware, we are rationing some of those high demand items. One of the things I do ask you to do as you're going through the store and you're maintaining good social distancing and good kind of sanitary procedures as you're walking the aisles of the commissary, just be mindful. Take only what you need for your family, just so we can manage this and be supportive of each other as a community. So those personal decisions do impact the broader procedure. The last thing I will say about the commissary, I have no concerns at this point regarding our supply lines, specifically in the state of Alaska, the interior of Alaska. That is something we monitor closely, and I have high confidence those are operating well now. There's just a widespread demand for some of those products. For example, hand sanitizer is one of the things that's going to be difficult to get in the commissary, but we're working it.
All right, and Doc, you mentioned an alternative to hand sanitizer, or with the bleach and water solution. Can you go over that, or a cleaning solution? Sorry.
There we go. Okay, so for clarification, do not clean your hands with bleach. All right, so a couple issues here. So with alternative to hand sanitizer, just good old-fashioned, listen to grandma, soap, water, wash your hands. For folks that are needing to clean with and don't have the Clorox or Lysol wipes, any brand of disinfectant wipes, you could do a 1 to 50 dilution of bleach to water. The recipes are conveniently located on the Eielson Facebook page.
All right, sir, thank you for that. Yes, please don't take medical advice from me. I work in the public affairs office, not at the med group. Doc Ramage is the guy that you should be listening to. Moving on to our next question, how is quarantine being enforced to those on it? By Aubrey Bowser.
Yes, so that's a great question as well. In regards to quarantine, first and foremost, this is a frontline supervisor issue. So we expect frontline supervisors to engage with the airmen, making sure they're getting clear guidance and making sure that we're following up appropriately. So that's one of the things we're doing. I will say, in order to back up those quarantine directions, I have also released as of yesterday in a command directive that anyone that really should be in quarantine is not allowed on base, unless they obviously live on base or need to access base for medical care. So specifically, if you traveled outside the state of Alaska for the last 14 days, stay home. You should be in quarantine. If you are experiencing any flu-like symptoms or COVID symptoms, specifically fever, cough, shortness of breath, stay home. You should be in quarantine, and contact your frontline supervisor and contact your doctor or the medical group for guidance. Or if you've come in contact with somebody that has been diagnosed as COVID, as having COVID, then just stay home, stay in quarantine. If you have people that you live with, making sure that you're staying away from them as well. If you are an airman where you can't do that, like you share a bathroom with somebody, please contact your supervisor. We will make sure that you are provided that environment that you can be in that state. One of the things I will mention, again, if you become, you had contact with somebody that has been diagnosed with COVID, you want to stay home. I will say we did have an incident of that happen in the wing. So we had a active duty member travel from outside the wing. They were here last week, specifically from the 12th to the 14th of March, and then they went home. They're at FE Warren, and they had been subsequently diagnosed with COVID. So we were able to do those social tracing, figure out where that active duty airman went, and we were able to put all those people in quarantine. So that's what happens when a case pops up, is we do the social tracing and kind of figure out where they have been in contact, and we take the precautionary measures, again, to protect our airmen and family, to safeguard our mission, and support the community as a whole.
That is very in-depth. I did not realize that was what was happening here at the wing, so it's good to know, though. Now, moving on, we have with us Captain Forsythe. He spoke a little bit earlier, and this question is for you. For those who are in quarantine and experiencing cabin fever or something similar, what are some things they can do to make this time easier?
There are a plethora of different things. We do live in a really amazing time, as everyone knows, that sometimes we take for granted. Like, for example, if you wanted to learn about how previous generations handled this stuff, like the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, or even the bubonic plague, if that is something you really want to steep yourself in, the mystery and wonder of epidemics, you are able to take online classes for free. There are over 450 Ivy League school or courses being offered by different Ivy League schools online. That's just one example. The Khan Academy, there's podcasts, audiobooks. It's a great time to get your knowledge on faux show. It's a really amazing amount of resources out there. For example, Audible has waived the fee for over 6,000 different books, and it's not just the weird ones. It's some really cool and great books. So I would recommend looking at resources online if you can. Focus on what you can control. What do you want your environment to look like at home? You're breathing it in every day, literally and figuratively, so try and find things that are that make it tolerable for you. And again, as I said earlier, you are what you practice every day. So if you are practicing cabin fever, try and pause and think, what do I want to do today? What do I have control over? And what do I want my life to look like? Feel free to call the mental health clinic. We are going to be providing support and care during this time as well. We are embedded in the med group, and we have a million different supports that we can provide for you, so things of advice and coping skills. Happy to do it.
Sir, can you provide that number for our listeners?
Yes, I can. I'm glad you asked. It is 907-377-3071. You can talk to any of our lovely staff. We have all sorts of cool stuff to offer folks.
Can they ask for you specifically?
If they want to, I will probably waffle your ears from talking to you so much. But yeah, feel free to call.
All right. So a big takeaway from that is that just because you're stuck inside doesn't mean that there aren't options for you activities for you to do. Like I said, over 400 classes that you can take online for free, I assume.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I mean, we've all subscribed to the meme game, and there's certainly some that can keep you entertained for hours and hours. So explore those different options. The world is on the internet. Colonel Bishop?
Yeah, I will say just a personal story. This morning, my 3-year-old attended a class, virtually over Zoom. So, I mean, that's not just for adults; it's for children, of all ages. So, again, make the most of these opportunities that we have in order to continue to grow, even when we may be stuck at home.
Absolutely.
Yes. So as I was saying, the world is online. We have access to books and to music and to movies and all of that stuff. And if that's not doing it for you, look to the people around you. Look to them for support and really make the most of this time. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we're all going to be facing, is how to make the most of the situation and go back to what life might have been like, I guess, if back to doing to establishing those connections and to making those connections stronger. So we are our hour is up, really. Again, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Colonel Ramage, Captain Forsythe, Colonel Bishop. Any parting thoughts for our listeners before we leave?
Just make sure that you're doing all those good hygiene things we've been talking about. Wash your hands, don't lick doorknobs, and keep from becoming that contact. So if you do those things, you will not get taken down.
Thank you, sir.
And if I could say, this is Captain Forsythe, this is a tough time of year in general, and we're up against it. As the commander mentioned, this is a knowable enemy. Anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, those are things that are sometimes unknowable. So definitely keep reaching out to your people, touching base with folks, engaging in things that bring you joy and that are interesting to you, and remaining thoughtful the way that you are engaging with this cast right now. Just think, what am I doing today that's going to bring me joy and happiness?
All right, Colonel Bishop?
Yes, so just first of all, just some thoughts of gratitude. First of all, thank you everyone for calling in and listening in to this podcast / virtual town hall on Facebook. Again, the ability for us to communicate and ask questions is going to be how we get through this. I will say, I also want to express gratitude to our leadership team across the 354th Fighter Wing and across the Eielson community. I see awesomeness going on each and every day, even in this challenging environment. I see leaders making decisions that align with our priorities, taking care of airmen and their families, making sure that we can safeguard the mission and get it done, and then also support our local community. So we can continue to do that. Although we're social distancing, we're connecting with each other, we're communicating, we are mentioning the problems that we have so that we can mitigate it. So please just continue to do that, and we're going to be just fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you again for joining us. Thank you to our listeners. More information about when the next virtual town hall will take place, well, you can see that on our Facebook page as soon as that decision is made. And please keep engaging. Please keep reaching out to loved ones. This is not unique to Eielson. It's across the world. So everywhere you look, wherever your families are, they're going to be going through it too. Look to them for support, and certainly look to your wingman for support. And with that, we are out. Thank you.